Over 10 miles of electrical cable are required to light the big board which keeps track of U.S. nuclear bombers.
The floors were made of formica, black formica, and we had to wear slippers on the set to save scratching it, because it's marked very easily.
They all came through one little door at the far end of the set. And the general reaction was, wow, look at this.
We knew we were in an impressive movie when you saw that set.
Adam and his team must also create a set of the interior of a B-52 bomber with no cooperation from the U.S. military.
I found a book called The Strategic Air Command by Mel Hunter. And on the front of it had the one picture which we desperately needed. Was not a very good picture, but a picture of the interior of the B-52 cockpit. And that was our starting point. We then had to really invent everything from then on.
Peter was brilliant, and because I more or less handed that whole interior over to Peter, and he spent hours and hours on switches and warning lights, which fascinated Stanley.
Merton's designs are realistic enough to cause concern in unexpected circles.
The publicity people invited some American Air Force personnel to look at the shooting we did. And they literally went white when they saw the inside of the B-52 because they said it was absolutely correct, even to the little black box, which was a CRM. So the next day I got a memo from Stanley. He hopes that I've got all my research from legal sources or from justifiable sources, because otherwise I and he could be in serious trouble with a possible investigation by the FBI.
Kubrick uses a series of models to simulate the B-52's flight toward the Soviet Union. But back projection footage is needed to create the illusion of flying at high altitude. A second unit is dispatched to the Arctic Circle.
The plane used to freeze up inside. It would all be white. If you touched it with your finger, you'd burn your finger. That's how cold it was when we were actually doing it. And one night they wouldn't give us any heating for the airplane at all, and we had to leave our cameras there. And when we opened the cameras, the film was just like dust. It just flaked away like that, and the spirit levels had all burst, had frozen and burst. It was 60 below. These were the conditions under which we had that 3 weeks. We did 28,000 miles.
The second unit crew qualifies for combat pay, accomplishing this unenviable task.
When we were flying across Greenland and then into Iceland, and we accidentally flew across a secret American base. We had no idea, because we were in the mountains, you see. And suddenly two American fighters came up either side of us and waggled their wings and told us to go down like this. The pilots did this, go down. We couldn't see anywhere to land. It was just an ice fjord. And so we came down, he said, everybody lie on the floor, because I will have no brakes. And it took an awful long time before we stopped. We were very close to the edge of the fjord by the time we finished. So the Americans were all there covered in their huge, Arctic foxtails and everything. And they thought that we were spies, because it said Dr. Strangelove across the plane. They thought we were Russians.
As the film was coming in from the Arctic, I would be breaking it down, as you would normally do in a cutting room anyway. Stanley and I discussed how we could make this all work, came up with this system. We would go through the film meticulously, or at least I went through the film meticulously, cutting out a frame from every piece of perspective film, which we then mount in a card, punched out card, and we put this piece of film in, rather like a slide, rather like a photographic slide. I would have collated all these so that we would have them sort of based upon plates prospectively for left window, plates prospectively for right window, plates prospectively for front. So it was all filed and collated with a rough description such as icebergs or ice flows or sky on the card.
As the technical aspects of the production continue to progress, Kubrick turns his attention to casting. He approaches Peter Sellers, who had recently won wide acclaim in Kubrick's previous film, Lolita, to again play several roles.
Peter always hoped to work with Stanley Kubrick again after Lolita. And whenever Stanley explained to him that he wished him to be in Dr. Strangelove, there was no difficulty persuading Peter. Especially when Peter realized that he could play three parts: the RAF officer, the US president, and the president's very sinister Nazi advisor, Dr. Strangelove. Much of the part that Peter eventually played, the three roles in Dr. Strangelove, was not scripted. It came out of Peter developing it with Stanley Kubrick on the set like a jazz musician, each of them contributing to the riff.
I was under the impression that I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons.
Do I take it, sir, that you are threatening a brother officer with a gun?
Whole point of the Doomsday Machine is lost. If you keep it a secret, why didn't you tell the world, eh?
The easiest part of the three for Peter to play was the RAF officer, because when he himself was serving, doing his national service, he used to impersonate officers, which of course was an offense that could have got him 10 years in a military prison. But he just loved it.
The role of President Muffley proves to be more problematic for Sellers. Initially, he decides to play him as a meek, fey character with an inhaler.
The whole stage, at Shepperton, was in tears because Peter played it as though he was suffering from asthma and a very bad cold. So he asked for an inhaler. And the whole 2 days we shot, he played it with his inhaler and his terrible cold. And it was hilariously funny.
We can establish contact with them at any time if it's necessary. The undersecretaries are all here, of course.
Right. And Stanley said, now, wait a minute, Peter, we're on the wrong track. Merkin Muffley should be the one man who understands the consequences of his actions, the one serious point in the film. So you've got to play him seriously. And Peter said, rather like Adlai Stevenson, if he'd become president if the results of the US election had gone the other way, and Stanley said exactly.
I will not go down in history as the greatest mass murderer since Adolf Hitler.
Sellers' well-known ability to improvise contributes to some of the film's most memorable lines and situations.
Jack, I'd love to come, but what's happened, you see? The string in my leg's gone.
What he was supposed to say is, I have this thing in my leg which goes every now and again. And he said, what I actually said was, there's this string in my leg. And then he said, Sterling Hayden and I both got hysterical, but we managed to control it. And Stanley was shouting, keep going. And that's the take that's in the film.
Sellers also improvises the classic line where the beleaguered President Muffley has to inform the Soviet premier that the US has accidentally launched a nuclear strike on his nation.
Now then, Dmitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with the bomb.
And though the conversations were actually scripted, Peter started, but only really delivered the first line of the script. And after that, he just improvised, and we just shot 10-minute takes.
One of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing.
He did this extraordinary improvisation in the war room, you know, with
a spirit of bold curiosity for the adventure ahead.
The actors just broke up. You could hardly get your scissors between the cuts.
Leadership and tradition.
Sellers even finds improvisational inspiration in Kubrick himself.
The black glove that he wears is Stanley's black glove. Stanley, for some reason, had to handle a lot of lights and didn't like getting his hands burned. So he put on these dark black gloves, which Peter always thought was very sinister. Peter borrowed one of them and put them on Dr. Strangelove. Dr. Strangelove comes out of the old High German cinema of Fritz Lang and Murnau, the sinister man, the man of tremendous power who is himself in some way impotent. That's to say, in the film, he is sitting in a wheelchair. Stanley loved that sense of the criminal genius who, for one reason or another, is handicapped, has got a disability, which doesn't prevent him destroying the world.
It would not be difficult, mein Führer. Nuclear reactors could... I'm sorry, Mr. President. Nuclear reactors could provide power almost indefinitely. Greenhouses could maintain plant life. Animals could be bred and slaughtered.
In addition to playing Strangelove, Merkin Muffley and Mandrake, Peter Sellers is also to play the key role of Major Kong,